afternoon and welcome to the Polaris MEP webinar. We are thrilled that you're here with us today to talk about face coverings and how those can help you when you're creating your COVID-19 control plan. My name is Erin Reed and I'm with Polaris MEP. Polaris MEP is a manufacturing extension partnership, and we are part of a national network of centers. There's one in every state and also Puerto Rico. And our job is to help you in your jobs, to help manufacturers stay competitive and implement best practices. The way we do that is with consulting and training services, and also by bringing in ideas from across the country and across Rhode Island to help you be more effective. Today, we're thrilled to have two people who can really help us be effective with our control plan. Mary Johnson is the Executive Director of the Rhode Island Textile Innovation Network, RITEN, and she's been spending the last few months completely immersed in the great world of PPE and helping in the efforts to help Rhode Island source and increase production of PPE. Previously, she was the Growth and Strategy Manager for Polaris MEP, and so she spent many hours on Rhode Island's manufacturing floors, helping the facilities really work through optimization and other challenges. And she's going to be speaking to the how of following face covering guidance, but why has the state required masks at the workplace to begin with? For that, we are very thrilled that Dr. Ernest Julian from the Rhode Island Department of Health will be joining us to give us that why of face coverings. There will be plenty of time during today's conversation to make sure that you can ask questions. In fact, we've got a Q&A session at the end. Since I can't see your hands raised from here, just a quick reminder, this is the Zoom meeting control bar, and the chat button is how you would put a question that you would like our presenters to address, or if you need some help troubleshooting, we will make sure that we can help you with that as well. So if you guys can make sure to use the chat function as you go along, that would be really wonderful. Great. So with that, I think that we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Mary to get us started. Mary?
Sure. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today, and thank you especially to Dr. Julian for finding time in his busy schedule to join us and answer your questions. For those of you who have participated earlier in the week in the webinars or are going to catch up with them on video later, Christian Cowan addressed screening and how to screen your employees prior to when they come to work, and Chris Cinieri addressed cleaning. Today we're going to focus on masks as part of your COVID-19 control plan. I'm going to start with Dr. Julian, who will set the stage about why the state has issued the masks. And then I will talk more about where to find masks, how to talk with your employees to instill a mask mindset, and what other risk factors you should probably consider at this time. And then we will have Q&A. So I believe that we will go right ahead to Dr. Julian, and then he will do his Q&A and then drop off the call, and then I'll continue and we'll do, Erin and I will do Q&A at the end as well. So a lot of the information in this webinar came from the Rhode Island Manufacturing and Polaris MEP Workplace Readiness Playbook. We worked together with state and federal sources to develop it using their guidance so that we could find, so that you could find it in one easy place, and it would be updated regularly so that you would always be abreast of what the current guidance is. And also recommendations to help you ramp up and keep your employees safe, especially as the state begins to reopen and people start to have a more active life outside of work, where they are exposed to additional risk. And so during that time, especially the transition time, it's going to be important that you are doubling down on your readiness so that you're keeping your employees healthy and your shop open. So why don't we turn it over to Dr. Julian, who can talk more about why face coverings are required and what the practices are today.
Okay, can you hear me? All right, so, and we'll start the video here too, I guess. All right, so why the mask? CDC this week, I saw some data saying that they feel that this has saved thousands of lives. Now, the important thing though is that masks are only about 50% effective. And if you've seen any of the videos about masks, you see that it blocks most of the droplets if you sneeze or cough. It doesn't block all of them. And that's important. The other thing is that the mask that the average person is using, if you're breathing in contaminated air, it won't protect you. It really protects others from the droplets of your coughs, your sneeze, your talking, your breathing. But it is effective, and it's important when it's combined with other things. And the other things it needs to be combined with is obviously the 6 feet, excellent hand washing, and basically the distancing. So you want all 3 of those things to be in place. Now, the other thing it's not going to protect you against is if you've got sick employees in the establishment. So your number 1 protection, and when we've seen massive outbreaks in manufacturing this year, we've invariably seen, we've seen sick employees. We've seen people who are working while they're sick. So the first line of defense is to keep sick people out of the place. The second thing is if you've got close contacts of those people, people who have been within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, you want to quarantine them. You want to exclude them for work for the 2 weeks. Now that's really important because in the early part of the outbreak nationally, FDA and CDC were advising that food, for example, was considered critical infrastructure. And they were saying that, well, because it's critical infrastructure, they weren't recommending excluding or restricting close contacts in the food industry. We did something different there. We said that, okay, you need to exclude people. And it's a good thing we did. We had 50 people ill in a food processing plant. 110 close contacts were excluded. And within about 10 days, 40 of those people became sick. If we hadn't excluded those people, it would have gone through the whole plant and about 700 people were at risk. So what's very important is, again, number 1, get sick people out. Number 2, identify close contacts right away, get them out of the facility for the 14 days. And then you use your mask and your distancing and your hand washing to prevent contamination in the facility. And if you do that, we found that you can keep the number of illnesses small. You might get the 1s or 2s because you've got community illness going on and people are going to show up sick, but you're not going to have it go through the whole place very quickly. And I think that's really the key points. Sick people out, exclude, and then the mask and the distancing and the hand washing and cleaning frequently contacted surfaces. And with that, I could take any questions that you have.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Julian. So I think the biggest question that we seem to hear a lot of is this question of things get very hot on the manufacturing floor and all of that. But you're saying masks have saved thousands of lives. Do you have any kind of tips or guidance to help employers deliver that message to their employees?
Well, people want to protect themselves too. And, you know, a number of times we're getting actually complaints from workers where that's not happening. So if you can maintain over the 6 foot distance, you don't have to have the mask is what FDA and CDC are saying. Now, the other thing that they'll say though, if you're going to do that, increase outside ventilation to the greatest extent possible. Check your ventilation system and make sure you're pulling in as much outside air as you can, open windows, those kind of things so that the virus can survive in the air for hours. It can survive on surfaces for up to 3 days. So again, you want to ventilate the place. You want to clean and disinfect frequently.
Excellent. And actually, Dr. Julian, you anticipated the next question we have that came in, which is, if you can maintain a 6 distance, they want to confirm you do not still need to wear the mask?
That's correct. If you can maintain over the 6 feet, the guidelines are that you're not required to wear the mask, but you know, the more protections, the better is what it comes down to. It's a matter of, you know, if people are 20 feet apart, you're not going to need the mask. But you know, if you're right at that 6-7 feet, your risk is much higher if they're not wearing the mask.
We had another question come in, and it was related to manufacturers who might be using KN95 masks. Do you have any information about how the OSHA standard relates to this? as part of, say, a respiratory protection program, the KN95 masks.
Right. The KN95 is not the same as the N95 mask. They're different, so your protections are different. The N95s are designed to protect you against the virus. The KN95s are not as effective. So it's probably better than, you know, the cloth mask that people are using, but it's not going to provide you total protection.
What is a reasonable accommodation for somebody who says they just simply cannot wear a mask? We did see that the Rhode Island Department of Health guidelines specify that if you cannot wear a mask for certain reasons, you don't have to, but what would be a reasonable accommodation for that?
Then they really need to be over 6 feet away from anybody. You know, that you really need to enforce that at that point in time. Now, the thing, and it does say that. So the guidelines talk about if you're under 2 years of age, you don't need to wear a mask. And if you've got health conditions, you have difficulty breathing normally, that you wouldn't be required to wear a mask. But then you really need to consider, do you want those people working, is the other issue, you know, from a liability perspective, and they're becoming sick, and also they're potentially making others sick. So that's something that you need to consider. But at the very minimum, if you're going to let them work, they have to be over 6 feet away from others.
You have once again anticipated one of the questions, which was, what are the reasons they could refuse or say that they needed that accommodation? The last question we had, Dr. Julian, was about, you had said specifically that if it's, you know, within 6 feet for more than 15 minutes, that's considered contact. Is that correct? That was the clarification.
That's considered, yes, close contact at this point in time. And the numbers have changed. When the outbreak first started, they used a couple of hours, and then they found that that wasn't protective enough. A lot of people were getting sick. And the current number was 15 minutes, but I've seen numbers of 10 minutes bounced around recently too. So, you know, as we learn more, the numbers may change, but what it comes down to is the longer you're exposed within that 6 feet, the more likely you are to get sick. So it's a matter of, okay, if you have an employee become sick at present time, the department is using 15 minutes. If somebody's within 6 feet for 15 minutes, even with a mask on, we're going to ask that they be quarantined and excluded from work for the 2 weeks.
I believe that that's it for the questions. If anybody else has a question, please shoot it towards me now. Dr. Julian, we are so grateful to you for spending the time with us today and sharing these specific recommendations and clarifying the whys of this. Mary, did you have anything else for Dr. Julian before we let him go on to one of his umpteen other obligations today?
I don't, but thank you very much for being so clear and for sharing your time with us today.
Yeah, the other thing I will say is if you have cases, contact us. And what we do is we have a surveillance tool that basically you can report the number of positives per day. You can report the number of people who become who have symptoms. And what we'll do is we'll work with you to make sure that you know what can be put in place so it doesn't spread throughout your whole business. So we're very willing to work with you on that.
Excellent. And for those who don't know, we do have a link to the Department of Health's surveillance tool for that reporting tool in the playbook itself. And we keep trying to make sure that it's updated with the latest links. So thank you.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you and have a good day.
Thank you.
Yep. Bye now.
Wonderful. So Mary, we're going to go on with you, and I'm going to go ahead and mute myself once again so you can get more into where and how.
Certainly. So since the mask guidance was first released by the governor in mid-April, I know that many of you had to scramble at that time in order to find masks for your employees because there wasn't really a ready supply. That has improved a lot in the last couple of weeks, and we would like to make you aware, if you're not already, of a couple of opportunities or a couple of avenues you can follow when you need to get masks. The Rhode Island Manufacturers Association has put together a buying cooperative where companies can log what they need in terms of masks, and then they make a group buy and then share them out with you. They are able to get some economy of scale this way. You may not be able to get masks like overnight through this program because they are saving up orders in order to have a threshold where they can make a group buy. but they have distributed their first set of orders already. And these are for, their co-op is for the disposable 3-ply mask that you see on the screen here. They are not currently offering the cloth reusable masks, but if you have a need for a disposable mask that you're issuing to your employees every day, this can be a great opportunity to buy them at a bulk discount by joining forces with other manufacturers in the state. As you can see, they also have other PPE available if you need gloves or hand sanitizer in particular. Those can be available through the same operation. RIMA is also just about to launch a buying platform, which will connect you directly to companies that are selling masks, and you can order them through the RIMA site and place your order through a selling platform similar to Etsy, if you think of Etsy or eBay. Where you're actually connecting through that platform to the buyer directly, who will take the information and ship the order out to you. So that is one resource that you can follow if you need to get masks on a regular basis. The other one is masksri.com. Which Polaris, designed by RI, and the Rhode Island Commerce work together to create. It connects local businesses to local sources of masks, and this primarily focuses on the cloth reusable masks. And it lists everything from major manufacturers like the Brickell Group and Propel LLC, Burkett Designs, Lotus Leather, who are manufacturing masks at scale, to the independent sellers who may be on Etsy or through other channels selling a smaller quantity of masks. I would encourage you to check this out if you're looking at the cloth masks for your employees. They are, I think a lot of the manufacturers I've talked to have found that there's a variation with the cloth masks that sometimes can allow for more comfort. There's everything from quilting fabric, which is harder to breathe through but releases fewer droplets, to a sports fabric similar to that is used in high performance sportswear that is more breathable and when layered gives an adequate amount of protection. There are also differences in the ear loops, and some of them have ties, some of them have loops that go around your ears, some of them have the loops that go all the way around your head, which when you're wearing them, as I'm sure you're all aware of now, when you're wearing them 8 to 10 hours a day, it can be difficult to, your ears can just get sore. There are also 3D printed and otherwise fabricated straps that can help to take the pressure off your ears if you're wearing the ear loop variety of mask. But I would really encourage you to look through these so that you can help your employees and you can find for your employees masks that are comfortable, which will increase their compliance in actually wearing them regularly. Another client that I've talked to had said that his employees were reporting headaches because of the ear loops in particular, that they just put a lot of pressure that makes them uncomfortable. And again, as Dr. Julian said, if they can stay in a space within your company where they are more than 6 feet away from other employees or from management, then they can remove the mask at that time or maybe drop it down for a while so that they can breathe more freely. They would need in those situations to be particularly aware of when they're getting up and going to the bathroom or when they're going to the break room, where they might be crossing within 6 feet of people, and then they would need to make sure that they had the mask back on. So it's probably a good idea to have it with them, even if they're not wearing it all the time, so that they're prepared for any unexpected contact that might happen. They are also looking at, there are other companies that have been giving their employees a couple of masks So that, because they are, I'm sure you've heard the analogy that your mask is like your underwear. It's a personal use item. It shouldn't be shared. It should be washed regularly and changed regularly. So it's helpful to have a couple so that you can rinse them out and let them dry overnight, and have a second one in the morning that's already dry. Those things can go a long way to encouraging compliance with your employees, so that they are, they feel comfortable and safe when they're at work. So Erin, if we could flip to the next slide, I will continue a little bit about the mask mindset. It is really important over time. The latest recommendations I've seen is we're likely to be in a mask, the guidance is to wear masks for at least 6 more months and likely longer. So you really need to build that community of care within your company. I hear a lot, one of the things I love about manufacturers in Rhode Island is they often talk about their employees as their family. And in that way, you need to be looking out for your family, and particularly for those who might have more difficulty complying, or wearing the mask regularly, in order to maintain the health of everyone. So it really is an opportunity to help your folks understand that they're wearing the mask to protect their coworkers, really, rather than to protect themselves. And their coworkers wear their masks to protect them. Because what it's protecting against is the droplets coming out of your mouth rather than the air coming in. So it really does require fairly high compliance in order to protect your entire company together. It's important to agree on the standards. Again, if you're going to give people a pass to, permission to not wear the mask if they're more than 6 feet away from other employees, you have to agree on the standards of maybe carrying your mask, or keeping it in a place, not leaving it around the workforce, or on a workstation where somebody else might come in contact with it. And when they're going to put it back on so that they are going out to the lunchroom. I have talked to a client who has set up an outdoor eating space where the tables are more than 6 feet apart, or the chairs are more than 6 feet apart, so employees can talk freely, but also maintain social distancing and eat. Those kind of things are also important, as well as the other legs of the stool, right? The hand washing in particular, and maintaining the social distancing. So you need to be clear and consistent with your communications. That can be team meetings, email reminders, posters in the different languages that your employees speak. And also, there are companies that have set up like COVID response committees that are helping make sure that that information is clearly spread across the employee base and that it's regularly reinforced. Another thing that I've heard of companies doing is setting up a very proactive system so that their employees know that the management is on top of really wants them to be safe and is very actively taking steps to ensure they're safe. One owner suggested that, or said that he had a committee where like one person goes out every day and brings back new supplies of hand sanitizer and wipes, so that they never run out of those items. And then the employees at least know that they're making an effort to stay on top of this. So if one day, Walmart's all out of hand sanitizer and there isn't any, but your stocks are running low, they know that you're aware of that and that you have a regular plan for keeping up with those supply issues. Again, the wearing of a mask becomes a sense of solidarity among your company. Where people are saying, I am taking the pledge to protect you, and I would like you to take the pledge to protect me, so that you build on that teamwork, and also take care of looking out for each other in a way that is supportive rather than a negative, I'm going to, report or tell on somebody who isn't maintaining the policy. That you want that encouragement to be positive, reinforcement and praise of people who are wearing their masks, consistently, rather than always relying on the stick to get people to comply. Erin, you want to head to the next slide? So you might want to take a look at the different kinds of masks and what would make it appropriate so that they're as comfortable as possible. As we talked earlier, we do hear a lot that it's hot in a lot of facilities. The really heavy masks can make it uncomfortable to breathe, especially if you're wearing them off, all day long. That might be a situation where the sports fabric masks might be a better, might feel more comfortable on the face and not feel as restrictive, but that you may also need to schedule additional breaks so that people can take a break and take their mask off for a few minutes to make it more comfortable over time. And I know that the concern with that is often, if I have to make all these accommodations, I run the risk of not being able to fulfill orders every day, and that's got to be my priority. And I would counter that with something that is, if you have an outbreak in your community, your productivity is going to dive pretty quickly. And being proactive to try to avoid illness will, in the long run, be a better risk management strategy. So it's worth looking at things that can help, and whether that's, again, finding masks that are more comfortable, providing them with several masks so that they can swap them out for different tasks, taking opportunities to have meetings outdoors where you can stand 6 feet apart now that the weather's nice and you can have a conversation without the masks on. That also is an issue that we have heard about in terms of, factory floors are loud, busy places often. And you probably have underestimated how much lip reading that you're doing in order to communicate with your team while you're on the floor. So you may need to be aware of, if communication isn't happening, that you need to look at different ways to make sure that communication happens. That might be more written instruction. That might be taking meetings outside or into spaces where you can be 6 feet apart and speak without your masks. It might be headsets so that you're hearing more closely what the people is, how you're communicating with your team. So I would encourage you to get creative. That's also something that the project managers at Polaris MEP can help with. They can take a walk through with you or talk through what your day looks like and help you determine where you might be able to make some accommodations that make it easier for people to wear their masks without without seeing a big drop in productivity. I would just continue to say that is it's definitely a concern. We hear it a lot, and that there are likely ways to improve productivity to offset any changes that you might have to make to keep your employees safe. Thank you. We also want to look at the risk factors. You may be familiar with the failure mode effect and analysis procedure that many companies use to assess their processes. The same thing can be used with your company. You need to take a look at, hopefully be proactive about it, and look for where the failures are likely to occur. But certainly if you have an outbreak or you have an employee who tests positive, you need to look at how, where that person may have been in contact with other people and what factors may have led to that, to him or her actually coming into your plant in the first place. And so I would say there's an example of a company in Rhode Island where, oh, Erin, I'm sorry, can you go back a slide? Where one person comes in and all of a sudden there's an outbreak across the company. And when you're looking at the risk factors, you're wondering, like, why? We don't know how this spread. These aren't people who typically have responsibility or daily interaction with each other. So now you can go on. And when they explored the opportunity, or where the problem was actually coming from, what they learned was that one of the employees, or that several of the employees, were carpooling together to work. And so the sick employee had shared a car, and the other employees, before they were symptomatic, had spread out across the plant and had infected other people in the community. And that's something Dr. Julian was talking about before, in terms of the contact tracing. And if you've been within 6 feet for 15 minutes or more with the person who was diagnosed, then they need to be in quarantine to avoid these kind of risks. Because people can be asymptomatic for quite some time, and you run the risk of them continuing to spread COVID through your workplace. And it may be because you're not considering what's happening outside or how they're coming to work. And you know, this is often you hear this quite often, like, they didn't get COVID in my workplace, it came in from the outside. And again, I think you need to be sensitive to your employees' life outside. While you can't dictate or control their lives, certainly you could provide a second, there is a company that is providing a separate mask for those who are commuting. So at the end of a work day, they wash their hands, take off the mask that they wore at work, put on a different mask to ride home in, and then they reverse that the next morning. And so that if you make sure that you're doing the hand washing and that you're wearing the masks, you start to limit. They also use hand sanitizer and are wiping down the car, you know, with the wipes to help reduce that impact, because clearly when you're in a car, you can't maintain the 6 feet social distance. Oftentimes when you're looking at workers who might be temps who are working with you, or your entry-level wage workers, generally they are not living in single person dwellings. So they are living with other people who are also essential employees who are going to work every day. And so your risk tree has gotten exponentially wider because they're living with people who are also essential workers, may work in a nursing home, may work in a hospital setting, may work in food service. And so you need to take extra precautions for when people are coming in and out and what they're doing to limit those risks. And if there are ways that you can provide support for that, to make it easier for them to, you know, wear masks when they're, so that they have extra masks to wear when they're around. There are companies who are providing them with disinfecting equipment so that they can make sure that they're, you know, able to disinfect the car and maintain the, like I said, the safety zones a little bit wider than just inside the facility. So again, when you're looking at the risk factors, look at where the failures are, look at the ways and types that those failures may have occurred, what is the effect or the impact on the process, and how can you fix it. It's going to take a lot of time back and forth to keep addressing the different ideas. Again, a committee can be really helpful with that. I have talked to a company outside of Rhode Island through the MEP National Network who has taken this to, they do like fire drills for COVID, where they will randomly pull an employee out and then figure out what, you know, track back to figure out where contacts may have been made, identify the items that have been touched, and analyze the gaps and concerns. This can be, what they reported was that they realized how many steps that their training process and their communication was missing in terms of best practices for their employees. It also made the team feel more assured that if there was an outbreak, they knew how to respond. It's like any other kind of training that we can prepare it in a theoretical way, but then when we're actually, you know, the plan very rarely survives that first impact. And so having drills so that you're practicing what the impact might look like and taking out as many holes as you can help long-term make sure that everyone, again, feels confident that their workplace is safe, that you have a plan to take care of them should there be an infection that comes into the workplace, and that employees have a clear channel to express their fears and where they think that there might be areas that are being overlooked.
Excellent. Thank you, Mary. These are some really great practical ideas that your different companies have shared with you, which is really a wonderful thing to have. So we've had a couple of questions coming in, and I think one of you started to talk about, but it's definitely, I think, on everybody's mind is the weather is getting warmer, and that is, what is the best fabric for somebody to use for face masks in extreme heat? You mentioned sports fabric, but can you elaborate a little bit more on what to do with extreme heat?
Sure. So again, you probably don't want to go with a mask that's a more quilted fabric. If you want a reusable mask so that your employees are not throwing something away at the end of every day, then you probably want to look at the lighter cotton fabrics, or again, the sports fabrics, which are meant to be, wick sweat, and be more comfortable on contact with skin. A lot of the fabrics that are more heavy duty were really not intended to be close to our skin all day long. And so that is we certainly can make recommendations privately of which, if you're using Mask RI, we can kind of help direct you to the companies that might be making the more breathable, or I don't want to say they're more breathable in the way that they let more droplets get out, but that feel more comfortable to the breathing process. We certainly could direct you to those. You might want to consider using disposable masks for a while, because they are lighter weight and don't feel as close to the face as some of them. They're also, you can tell by looking at the pictures of the ones that are for sale on the Masks RI site, that they're definitely different designs. There's a more duckbill design, there's a flat design, and that different people based on face shape, weight, body build may feel more comfortable in one version versus another. And there is a little bit of trial and error that will go into that as well.
Excellent. I like the idea of trial and error, because as with any equipment that we would be giving to our workers, we're going to first try a few options, see what fits best, what helps them feel best, and work at their kind of optimal level. Of course, we would be doing that with this new piece of equipment as well. You wear glasses, I wear glasses if I'm outside of the house, and so that's a consideration I've had to take into my new piece of equipment and my new uniform.
Right.
So,
and you'll also find that, some of them have the nose wire that helps clamp them down to avoid the glare on the glasses, especially if you're wearing safety glasses as well. But I would say that it's also a good idea to keep a tracking list, so that you're maintaining a list of your employees when you issued them a mask, and that will help you understand if there are people who are having trouble understanding the importance of this, or who are not really buying into the program, so that you can address those issues on a case-by-case basis to help people understand why it's important that they remember their mask, that they wear their mask, that they clean their mask.
So the next question came in, and it's actually from somebody who is not a manufacturer, but has to go to support machinery and equipment in various manufacturing facilities. And they said that they went to one the other day, and they were not issued a mask. The question is, should it be a requirement of visitors? And if you're requiring it of visitors, what is the kind of guidance around how you support that requirement?
Right. I believe that the guidance is that you have to supply the masks to your employees. I would expand the definition or the recommendation to say, if you're working with temps who are not technically your employees, but they're in your facility every day working for you, you should also be providing masks for them. Or at least having a conversation with the agency that you're working with to make sure that they have masks. When you have guests into your facility, certainly, it's a sign of respect, I think, to your employees that you provide them a mask. Those could be disposable, because clearly they're not going to be used. But it's probably always a good idea to have a stock of some available, so that if somebody arrives in your office without one, you have the ability to continue the meeting, and you don't have to stop or cancel a meeting because somebody doesn't have the protective face mask. And that goes to company owners and CEOs who may not be on site daily. It's important that leadership start from the top, and that when they're in the facility, whether they're there every day, or they're there once a week, or they're there once a month, that they're respecting the guidelines as well, and wearing the masks and maintaining the social distancing. so that your leadership team is setting a good example.
Thank you. Since you mentioned disposable masks, we got a question in. How many times can someone use a disposable mask?
You know, a disposable mask is meant to be a one-day wear. There are, certainly when I walk in my neighborhood, I see cars with disposable masks hung, you know, on the rearview mirror. And so I know that people are reusing them. There is a company that I'm aware of that has issued their employees a little bottle of spray sanitizer or of alcohol sanitizer, and they're spraying them down and they're wearing them for a couple of days. But they're not really built for continuous use, because in a hospital setting, you know, a patient may wear one of those for 15 or 20 minutes. They're not using them for, by and large, for an entire day. And you're going to see wear and tear on the elastic. You're going to see wear and tear on the elastic on all masks because people are taking them on and off, you know, and with best practice, they're actually taking them off by the ear elastic and not by handling the fabric piece. And so, you know, I would say if you're going to try to stretch that, make sure that you're paying attention to maintenance so that you're reissuing them regularly before they fail. Because the last thing that you need is to have them fail when an employee's in a situation where they're fabricating something and they're holding something and they can't walk away for 15 minutes or they can't excuse themselves from a process where they're within 6 feet of other people.
Thank you. So the next question that came in was, and maybe it kind of goes off of what you were saying, which is kind of the risk factors that we should be considering. You mentioned a few risk factors about carpool as an example.
Yep.
Are there any other risk factors that manufacturers should be considering to make sure that the mask portion of their control plan works?
Yeah, so again, the mode of transportation to work is going to be important. If you're taking the bus or you're carpooling, you're going to have some risk. You can't really ban an employee from doing either of those things because you want them to come to work. And it's just not really an economic reality in a lot of cases for everyone to be able to drive themselves to a work site every day. That you should be aware of and supportive of the living situations that are multi-generational, or roommates, you know, where other people in the household are essential workers, so that you have an understanding of what the risk actually looks like and how you can help everyone in that household by sharing information in their language, or being supportive of you know, giving employees information to take home so that they can help to educate their broader circle so that people are being compliant. And again, as we start to open up and people are going back to restaurants and going to the beach and going to all these other places, there's going to need to be education about their life outside of work, even though you can't dictate what their behavior is outside of work. But education goes a long way on that.
Well, Mary, that's the last question that we have gotten in for today. So before we head out, are there any kind of last takeaways or guidance that you give people on helping their team mask up?
Sure. And I would just say, I will give a plug to our project managers who have been working all through the pandemic. We have not been going on site, mostly because most companies have closed to outsiders at this point, you know, up until this point. But that if you need to troubleshoot a problem, certainly that we have the expertise on hand to be that extra set of eyes to help you look at where the failures might be, recommend best practices based on what's happening in other manufacturing facilities. And also I would point you back to the guidebook, which is updated regularly as the guidance changes, because certainly we all are aware that the guidance is changing on and off as you know, as better information has become available to the team at the Department of Health and the administration.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mary, and thank you to all of our attendees. Please look for an email from me later today, which will have a copy of the deck today, and also some requests for feedback from you so we can make these programs as actionable as we possibly can. Thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you all.